Kyle starts his day with his over-the-top exercise routine before heading to school. He's running for president of the Green Committee, but his campaign speech is unconventional. He calls everyone ugly and tells them to embrace the suck, then admits they'll vote for him because he's rich, hot, and his dad's a famous news anchor. The crowd eats it up. Kendra, however, is not impressed. She storms out after vandalizing Kyle's posters. When Kyle confronts her in the hall, they trade insults like it's an Olympic sport. He tries to drag Lindy into it, but she just shakes his hand and moves on, leaving him looking dumb. At home, Kyle's dad, Rob, is busy being a shallow jerk, ranting about looks being everything. Kyle tries to connect, but Rob ditches him for a phone call. The family maid, Zola, tries to chat with Kyle, but he dismisses her story about missing her kids like the spoiled brat he is. The next day, Kyle wins the election, because of course he does, and hears Kendra's mad about it. He pretends to make nice and invites her to his party, but he has a plan to humiliate her. At the party, Kyle's girlfriend gets mad at him for giving her the wrong flower, so he gives it to Lindy instead. She explains that white roses mean, "I'm worthy of you," which seems like bad news for Kyle. When Kendra shows up, Kyle publicly mocks her, thinking he's hilarious. But Kendra is done playing. She curses him to embrace the suck for real, and he starts feeling dizzy. After a trippy series of events, including creepy stares, near-car accidents, and weird visions, Kyle stumbles home, only to find out he's been transformed into a literal monster. His face is covered in scars, tattoos, and metal, with embrace and suck etched into his eyebrows for good measure. Kyle freaks out. Rob freaks out even more and drags Kyle to a top doctor, who tells them there's no medical solution. Rob, being Rob, suggests a face transplant, but Kyle realizes his dad is only worried about his reputation. Furious, Kyle bolts. Rob dumps Kyle in a private house outside the city and bails, never looking back. Kyle is left with Zola as his only company, and she's not thrilled about it either. His friends think he's in rehab or jail, and Kyle spends his days exercising, moping, and dealing with a magical tree tattoo that changes with the seasons. One day, a blind tutor named Will shows up. Will doesn't take any of Kyle's sass and fires back with his own sharp comebacks. Kyle's not sure whether to be annoyed or impressed. That night, Kyle starts opening up a little, asking Zola about her kids, and realizing how much he misses real connections. Kyle crashes a costume party to blow off steam, where everyone assumes his monster face is just a really convincing mask. He runs into Kendra again and begs her to lift the curse, but she's not having it. While wandering the party, he sees his ex with his best friend. Turns out, she's thrilled Kyle's gone because she hated being mean just to keep up with him. Ouch! Lindy shows up and unknowingly gives Kyle some credit, saying she admired his honesty, even if he was a jerk about it. She calls him a shot of life, which makes him rethink, well, everything. The next morning, Kyle finds Will casually playing darts. For the first time in a while, Kyle's actually impressed. Maybe things are starting to look up, scary eyebrows and all. Kyle still isn't into the whole tutoring thing, so instead, he and Will exchange high school stories. Will casually mentions he kept dating even after going blind, which inspires Kyle to stalk, check out Lindy on social media. He finds an old picture of them and realizes he can't stop thinking about her. Naturally, the next step is to go stand outside her house like a total creeper and watch her through the window. One day, Kyle notices Will still puts effort into looking sharp, even though he's blind. When Kyle asks why, Will drops a truth bomb. It's not about how others see me, it's about how I see myself. Feeling like a jerk, Kyle takes a hard look at his own social media and finds nothing but selfies, insults, and a whole lot of ego. Disgusted, he deletes his account and writes, "I am no more." Dramatic much? Kyle starts visiting the city regularly to watch Lindy from a distance. Totally normal behavior. He smiles whenever he sees her being kind to strangers, which Will and Zola mistake for him actually making progress. They celebrate by playing golf on the roof. One night, Kyle sees Lindy rushing out of her house, panicking because her dad's gone AWOL. He follows her to an alley where two sketchy dealers are threatening her dad over some unpaid debt. Kyle jumps in, hero mode activated, and saves the day. He even carries an unconscious Lindy back to her building like a knight in shiny, scarred armor. But Lindy's dad? He shoots one of the dealers and vows more chaos. Kyle takes a picture of him, promising to protect Lindy in exchange for his silence. The next day, Lindy arrives at Kyle's fancy hideout, furious. She demands to meet the mysterious house owner, but Kyle, too chicken to show his face, has Zola call him Hunter. Lindy vents her frustration online, updating her status to in hell. Not the best start. Kyle tries to win her over by leaving her food and expensive gifts, but she's not impressed. Zola finally tells him to stop treating her like his ex and start getting to know who Lindy really is. Kyle listens and starts paying attention. He overhears Lindy complaining about missing the simple things in life and awkwardly tries to bond with her. When she catches him lurking, she calls him a creep, but Kyle explains her dad's desperate attempt to protect her. She softens and even accepts some juice from him. Progress. Determined to do better, Kyle writes down his feelings in a letter and studies her social media to learn more about her. He finds out she loves roses, so he decides to build a rooftop greenhouse full of them. It takes weeks, but he pours his heart into it. Meanwhile, Lindy starts leaving her room, befriending Will, and warming up to the strange masked guy who keeps leaving her juice. One night, Lindy catches Kyle watching TV. He keeps his hood up to hide his face, but they bond over bad jokes and cheesy shows. When Kyle invites her to join him for tutoring, she agrees. Feeling brave, Kyle finally reveals his face. To his surprise, Lindy doesn't scream or run away. She just shrugs and says, "I've seen worse." Thrilled, Kyle wakes Will up the next morning, declaring he's ready for tutoring. He even asks Will to make him seem smart, which Will laughs off as impossible. With Zola's advice to just be yourself, Kyle brings Lindy to his greenhouse. She's amazed by the roses, but his attempt to impress her with a poem fails when she already knows it. As their tutoring sessions begin, they bond over reading romantic poetry together. Winter melts into spring, and Kyle notices the first flower blooming on his magical tattoo. Panicked, he finds Kendra and begs for more time. When she refuses, he makes a selfless plea for Will to get his sight back and for Zola to be reunited with her family. Touched, Kendra agrees if he can succeed in finding love. That night, Kyle checks on Lindy and finds her staring at their old picture on social media. Looks like things might finally be turning around for our brooding beast. Lindy tells Kyle he's just a jerk from school, but Hunter reminds her of him. She thinks he had a good side under his bad attitude, and even admits she had a crush on him. Kyle gets his hopes up and takes Lindy to the zoo. There, he shares a sad story about his mom leaving and how he once hid at the zoo to watch a documentary about a mother elephant who came back to visit her baby's bones. Lindy gets all emotional and holds his hand. Later, they watch the sunset on a roof, and Lindy falls asleep on his lap. Kyle says he loves her, but when he goes to her room, he sees a message on her computer about a trip to Machu Picchu. Apparently, Lindy was planning to run away with a friend. The next day, Kyle asks Will and Zola if he should let Lindy go. His tattoo's flowers are almost out of time, so they tell him to go big with one last romantic gesture. Using his dad's limo, Kyle takes Lindy to the family lake house. While they're on the way, Lindy gets a message that her dad has been arrested, but she deletes it. At the lake house, Lindy opens up about her dead mom and how taking care of her addict dad has been terrible. She was planning the trip to escape, but living with Kyle has been the break she needed. They walk, holding hands, and Kyle tosses her a letter. She falls while catching it, and they end up in a weird, almost kiss position. Just as they're about to kiss, Lindy's phone rings. Bad news. Her dad is in the hospital because he overdosed. Kyle rushes her to the train station, and before she leaves, Lindy tells him he's a good friend. On the train, she reads the love letter Kyle wrote, and later, she keeps calling him, but he ignores her. He thinks she just sees him as a friend and is mad about the letter. Will and Zola convince Kyle to stop being a coward, so he heads to school to apologize. Everyone stares at his weird face, but he tells Lindy he doesn't feel ugly around her. She says he's not ugly and finally kisses him. The last flower blooms on his arm, and Kyle tells her to go on her trip because she deserves it. As she leaves, Lindy says, "I love you." Kyle starts walking home, feeling Kendra's eyes on him. He freezes, checks his reflection, and bam, he's back to normal. His arm just has one rose now, instead of a whole tree. Lindy comes running back, but when she sees him, she doesn't recognize him. She calls for Hunter, and Kyle's phone rings. They share a kiss, and now they both understand that love. Meanwhile, Zola's family gets green cards, and Will can see again. Rob's at work, clueless about the intern Kendra, who's there to teach him a lesson. A few days later, Kyle and Lindy are living it up on their Machu Picchu vacation. Happy endings all around.